a huge fund of, let's say, $200 million. Okay? So we really want to take advantage of this competition effect, and again, this is what we call the endogenous matching effect. And to give you one example, here in Ontario, so the government, again, I mean, that's a response to what many people argued, well, so capital is limited, so we need to offer more capital to these to entrepreneurs. Well, so why don't we just take taxpayers' money and inject it into the VC market, right? So the Ontario Venture Capital Fund, $90 million come from the government of Ontario. What we argue is, well, that's a good first step. But ideally what we want to see is that, that Ontario is encouraging more VCs to enter the market. We really want to take advantage of this competition effect, right? So having only a few VCs in this market, it doesn't really help. Okay? So ideally we want to have multiple VCs, maybe smaller VCs in the market competing for the top ideas here in Canada. Okay, so some implications from our study. Yeah, so hopefully, the first implication now is quite obvious. Well, we should remove barriers to entry for VCs, right? So we should encourage more VCs entering the market and to compete for the top entrepreneurial ideas in the business, in the market for, or in the market for business ideas. That is, at the same time, it's related to the first implication, we should also prevent concentration, right? So again, this is what I said before. Having multiple small VCs is actually beneficial for the entire economy compared to having only one or two big players in the VC market. Okay? So we should prevent concentration in the VC market, of course, on the VC side. And then I was talking to Yolanda, and she was telling me, well, the people are interested in implications from your study. Well, I was thinking about another potential implication, and this is directed to entrepreneurs. So one implication from our model, from our study is, well, if you have an idea and you seek financing, well, you better do it during economic booms. And the reason is the most obvious reason is, well, during economic boom, well, VCs have really deep pockets, so you're more likely to get financed. Okay? But what our study shows is, well, when you seek financing economic booms, so first of all, if you have an amazing business idea, you're going to get financing anyhow, right? No matter whether we're in economic boom or we're in economic bust. But if you get financing in an economic boom, then you get more favorable contract terms. You will receive, on average, more capital, and on average, your venture will be more likely to succeed. Okay. Okay. Any questions? Yeah. Well, I guess one of the key arguments is because this is what happened in the 2000 bubble, right? .com bubble, right? So all these VCs invested in really hopeless ventures, right? And some politicians feel kind of obliged to protect investors. Okay, so we make investments in VCs. Well, I mean, we somehow need to be protected by politicians. So that's the idea behind it, right? So first of all, I disagree with the idea of protecting investors. And secondly, well, as our study shows, well, I mean, this is exactly the opposite to what we should do. Yeah?
Craig?
Two questions. The first one, the relative size of the Canadian market versus the American, is it 10 to 1? That sort of, what's the size of the venture capital?
Our VC market in Canada is, well, I shouldn't say neglectable, but it's very small compared to the US. I mean, that's essentially one of the problems. I mean, lots of Canadians have very good business ideas, but instead of staying in Canada, so they go to the US because, I mean, they're more likely to receive financing, right? And they're, better infrastructure for, starting your own venture. Right?
Second question, is there other tactics that the government could use to incent the creation of more venture capital organizations other than simply providing capital? Have you come across examples in other nations?
Well, I mean, one of the problems with the VC market is whenever a VC makes an investment, so you care about the profitability or return on investment, you don't really take into account the social benefit, right, of entrepreneurship, like creation of jobs and so on and so forth. So one possibility would probably be to, again, to inject more money into the VC market, so to provide VC funding, right? So this is what the government of Ontario does. However, it comes at a cost, right? So there's a study showing that all of these government VCs are on average less efficient than private VCs. But if you really want to encourage entrepreneurship, foster entrepreneurship, and we want to create more jobs, well, that's probably a cost we're willing to bear. Right?
And just to follow up, do any country use taxation policy to encourage venture capital?
So you mean here in Canada? Well, you could. One possibility is, and this is, when you take a look at our study, it might come clear. You can actually subsidize, cost of capital, right? So as a VC, you have to guarantee, or you have to give your investors a certain return on investment, right? So if you, as a government, go to VC and say, okay, so I subsidize some of those returns, right? So I'm going to give you, I hand over a check, right? So then you can actually encourage more market entries, right? So more VCs are actually willing to make investments. Yeah.
Helen? When I was listening to your presentation, I kept thinking, I think what you've done is you've proved the logic of the Dragon's Den, because when you watch that program, what strikes me is that the entrepreneurs who come on the program, are perhaps after the dragon's money, but really what they're really after is competition from other venture capitalists on their invention. Mm-hmm. And it relates to an earlier presentation by one of your colleagues from Queen's about the legitimacy of their entrepreneurial idea through the media and through a marketing opportunity like that. So I just thought that was a nice analogy to what your findings were. But what I also wanted to share is that when you take this back to the very basics of what we're talking about here with the creative economy and some of the issues around rural communities across Canada, there's not very many opportunities for rural entrepreneurs to interact with venture capitalists. Mm-hmm. And I saw a very small motivation along this line this summer that I sort of was curious about. One of the agricultural fairs that I visited this end of the summer had a local innovation entrepreneurship show or a demonstration. Mm-hmm. And when I talked to people after that demonstration, in particular a fellow who had invented an all-terrain wheelchair so that youth and adults who are in wheelchairs can engage in all-terrain sports, so equivalent of ATVing or mountain biking, etc. And when he was demonstrating that, he was saying, the reason I came to the show was I want to show people what I've created, not just because I'm from this area, but because I want to talk to people who can help me grow this business locally with local venture capitalists. So have you ever found examples like that of models of linking venture capital to the rural areas?
Well, not for VCs, right? So VCs, their main objective is, to pick, the star idea, right? And it's very unlikely you find the star idea in a rural community, right? But having said this, there are lots of angel investors out there, right? So they're willing to put in their own savings, essentially, right? So their own money into, some businesses. And of course, the idea of angel investment is also, to give entrepreneurs some advice, right? And this is actually happening in rural communities. So I'm aware of some, cases in the US. I don't know whether this is what is happening in Canada as well. So this, I don't know. So angel investment is, to some extent, better suited for investments in rural ventures.
So I think we're talking about a paradox, which is we're saying that the future of rural Canada in part depends on fostering the creative economy, and we're hearing that the creative ideas are not going to be nurtured in rural Canada. And we will, because there's more venture capital competition outside rural Canada, find that our youth continue to, and our entrepreneurs continue to move to urban areas where there is more competition and there are deeper pockets and where they will have perhaps greater receptivity to their ideas. I'd love you to comment. We only have 1 more minute and I see a hand raised. So let's take your final comment, and then Veikko, if you could comment on both comments, that would be great.
Well, as an entrepreneur, certainly venture capitalists, I think you're right in that they're not going to come out to a rural area necessarily. That's not the second born anyway. So private equity investors and angel investors is a much strategy, especially for the types of business you see launched in a rural area. And having been in that space, I would say that one of the ways to foster entrepreneurship in a rural area is to design, manufacture connections between people who have those means in the community. And we do a lot of cross-idea, about creating ideas and supporting those ideas, helping people with business plans, that kind of stuff, but linking them to private equity, people with private equity. I'm not so sure that's worked as hard at, and there's an opportunity there. And there are people, I know, I'm sure in other counties as well, who have moved to Toronto and they've made tons of money in their large houses, and they do have private equity. They want to be engaged in a way that sussing those people out and maybe creating pools, local community-based private equity pools that are, run. It might be an interesting policy strategy for rural environment.
Those are excellent comments, and thank you, Veikko. And let's